Right, as we've just gone down a person, I will kick off before anybody thinks that we're not doing this. So, good afternoon. Hello, I'm Tom Aber. I'm Director of the Digital Cultures Research Centre. Welcome to what Amy reliably advised me is the seventh seminar in our series of talks from DCRC members, colleagues, staff within the university about their research interests, about things we think are of interest to the wider community than just the DCRC. So, very brief intro from me. This is a discussion about the intersection of spirituality and digital practices, and the talk will delve into a range of research projects and personal practices that explore how digital mediums serve as arenas where people experience life, spirituality, and community, highlighting the evolving relationship between technology and human experience. If I can flag that we've got an hour for this, or just short of one now. Shawn advises me that this talk won't run for the full hour, so you've got time for Q&A at the end. If you can drop questions in the chat, we'll pick up and field them at the end. But very, very briefly, to thank Shawn and Dulcie in advance for this. Shawn is Professor of Cultural Interdisciplinary Practice at UE Bristol. Dulcie Wagstaff is a British photographer, artist and educator based in Bristol. I will hand over to you, go quiet, and I'll pop up at the end. Thank you both.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you, Amy, Nick, and everyone DCRC for inviting us to do the chat today. And thank you, people, for attending to hear what we have to say. So, yeah, I'm pleased to be able to share the stage with Dulcie. We're going to be speaking about separate but interconnected practices, if you like. So it's not one overarching project. We've got different practices, but we've got shared interests, and that's where we felt was a good opportunity to give the talk together. I know that in academia, it can sometimes feel frowned upon to talk about one's own religious and spiritual tendencies, and there's often an expectation to maintain certain intellectual distance, a notion that personal belief and lived experience can somehow dilute academic rigor. And even on that note, I have to say that, I feel slightly nervous to some extent, because actually we're going to be talking about personal practices, making ourselves slightly vulnerable, but that's in the spirit of the conversation. And that's why we wanted to give this talk, because we actually felt that there will be others, possibly, hopefully, in the room also that have got similar interests, but we don't get to share it often. So those of you that know my work, you might know fringes of this, but actually what we're going to be talking about, well, for me, isn't necessarily my core research projects, but it is things that I do anyway, and that are related and even you could say underpin my research practice and my research projects. So it's kind of that wider scope. So even though there is this reluctance within academia, can be, to talk about one's own religious practice, for me personally, I made the decision a long time ago to never hide who I am. And that's especially because large parts of my own creative practice and academic research are deeply entwined with my own personal life worlds. So yeah, we will be making ourselves transparent, making ourselves vulnerable, but as I say, that's all in the spirit. So strictly speaking, as I say, none of the three pieces are classed as research, but I'm really pleased to be able to fuse the conversation and bring Dulcie in to also share her project that she'll be talking about in a moment. Today, we'll be looking at how creative arts practice can explore spiritual practice in everyday digital life, considering how photography, artificial intelligence, craft, and social media shape contemporary experiences of faith, ritual, and remembrance. These artistic forms, whether handmade, algorithm generated, or digitally shared, offer new ways to express spirituality, to contemplate presence and absence, materiality and immateriality, and to reflect on the evolving relationship between sacred and the technological. Now, over the past few years, we've seen a significant shift in how digital technology shape the deeply personal and communal experiences, including in spiritual and religious practices. The use of digital media in worship, prayer, and faith-based communities is not entirely new. People have long engaged in religious content online, shared prayer groups, for example, chat groups, and they've used digital platforms to connect with faith communities. However, during the COVID-19 pandemic, these practices became central to how people engage with their spirituality. Restrictions on the physical gatherings meant that for many, religious and spiritual experiences became primarily digital, with services streamed over Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube. This shift forced us to reconsider what it means to be present in a spiritual context. Can one be there without truly being physically there? What does it mean when prayer, ritual, and reflection are mediated through a screen? And these are not just abstract questions, they relate to what we call digital placemaking, the ways that digital technologies shape our experiences of space and place. Digital placemaking isn't about replacing the physical with the virtual, but rather about exploring how digital technologies interact with our real world environments, influencing how we navigate, connect, and how we remember.
Yeah, so similarly to Shawn, I feel a sense of vulnerability in sharing this work, not just within an academic context, but also within the art world, in which these themes and visual styles, there are usually styles that are very current and fashionable, whereas this topic of spirituality and religion rarely fits into those frameworks within art nor within popular culture. However, this personal discomfort was part of the impetus for making the work that I'll share with you. The work also stemmed from a sense that when people, generally myself included, picture religion and spirituality in their mind's eye, it was a stereotypical image of perhaps an older generation piously following formal traditions. Of course, that is one experience, but as a member of a young person's Zen Buddhist group in Bristol, which is populated by people aged 18 to 35, who are attempting to shape traditions into and around their modern lives, where they're still battling the same addictions of consumerism, social media, and screen use, and so on. And these traditions therefore unavoidably become personalized and fluid.
Okay, so just going to start sharing the screen. Bear with. So hopefully you can see that as a full screen. So I'll be talking about the first project, then Dulcie will follow. So first project I'll be talking about is what I call Rasta Lens, seeing the sacred in the everyday. And one of the descriptions was that seeing Rastafari cultures and colours in everyday life in a form of moment-to-moment, open eyes meditation. So just to give you a bit of context within how this fits in my wider research framework, if you like, all of my projects that I do relate to this methodology that I developed called small anthropology. And it's an interdisciplinary methodology that embraces creative practice as well as traditional forms of academic inquiry. And it's kind of looking at an ethical framework of trying to flatten the plateaus, flatten the hierarchies between different forms of media, not necessarily privilege checks, embracing creative approaches, embracing community knowledges, etc. I won't go through them all. You can kind of see some of them there. And this next one that I'm going to talk about very much relates to this element of small anthropology, which is about learning from the everyday and the mundane. And for this particular project, I use photography as my medium. And as I say, it wasn't a fully fledged research project. It's very much a personal kind of passion project, but it's one that I did at given times. So I carried out this photography project called Rasta Lens using my mobile phone camera to spontaneously capture images whenever I saw the colors green, yellow, and red appearing in the frame at the same time. These can be entirely mundane scenes, but the moment I saw these colors together, I would stop, take a picture, and document the arrangement. Now, within Rastafari culture, these colors hold deep significance and symbolic register. The colours of the Ethiopian flag, which are central to the Rastafari identity, which is the spiritual homeland. Green represents the land and symbolises nature, life and growth. Yellow, or gold as it refers to, represents wealth, both material and spiritual abundance, as well as the sun's energy, which links it back to nature. Red stands for the blood of those who have suffered, our ancestors, particularly African people throughout history, reminding us of the struggle, resistance, and their sacrifice. So this project was about more than just taking pictures. It became a spiritual practice, training my eyes to notice these sacred colours in everyday, mundane surroundings. In some ways, it mirrors the concept of mindful seeing, the practice found in various spiritual traditions, where deep attention to visual details become a form of meditation. The act of searching for these colours, even in unexpected places, made me more present and aware, tuning in to my surroundings in a way that felt almost like, as I say, prayer or meditation. When I saw these colours together, I would acknowledge it, and there'd be an internal dialogue going on, which again is a form of kind of remembrance and thanksgiving. This connects to the broader ideas about photography and spirituality. Scholars like David Morgan argue that religious imagery, whether formal or informal, can shape our spiritual awarenesses by influencing what we notice and value in the world around us. In a way, Rasta Lens was my attempt to embody that idea, using photography not as documentation, but as a tool for deepening perception. Now, at a time when mobile photography is often associated with distraction, snapping quick pictures without much thought, this practice became a way of slowing down. It reminded me to appreciate small, detailed moments, fleeting moments that I might otherwise have overlooked. And in doing so, it transformed the act of taking a photograph into something much more intentional, a moment of recognition, a way of seeing with deeper meaning. And I have this quote: the unconscious obsession that we photographers have is that wherever we go, we want to find the theme that we carry within ourselves. And this was very much an Instagram-based project. Whenever I would do it, you know, I'd just put it up on my Instagram feed. And I also felt it was important for students to see me as one of their tutors using mobile phone technology. We could often have this hierarchy within photography. If it's not, you know, if it's not something that you've booked out from the stores, for example, a large format camera and medium format camera, that it's not real photography, but actually mobile phone is as much as the photographic language as our professional cameras. So it was important that I was being seen to bring in these new technologies into my own photographic practice and exploring them out loud, live, and without overthinking it, really. So over to Dulcie.
Great, thanks, Shawn. So the project that I will share with you today, called Glimmer, was created during my MA over 2024, and explores young people's, and that's specifically young people's, experience of spirituality and religion today. I wanted to challenge pre-existing stereotypes, as I mentioned earlier, but also invite viewers to contemplate their own connection to belief and the practices that connect them to the world. I believe that everyone believes in something, whether they associate that with spirituality or not. And some of the practices that you'll see in the photographs might not match up with the image you have of religion and spirituality in your minds. So yeah, an invitation to openness there. So Glimmer began with a series of conversations with potential participants, exploring their practices, as well as the journey that brought them to however they situate their spirituality today. So this on the slide is an example of like what I'm calling a spiritual roadmap that I asked all participants to make for me, that begins with like birth and ends with wherever they feel they are today, and all of the kind of milestones or important moments on that journey. Interestingly, people also found this practice, this process, quite challenging, very inward looking. I think our journey throughout like a spiritual kind of awareness, we often don't really delve into it, and I was really asking people to be analytical about it, which had some interesting results. So for some people this was like a continuation of family traditions, but in others it was a response to something lacking within contemporary life, and some people explicitly voiced technology as being detrimental to their spiritual lives and something they want to move away from. These conversations were followed by creating a series of portraits made following a socially engaged and collaborative approach, always in conversation with the subject. Sometimes this was a straightforward depiction of religion, such as prayer, and sometimes it was a conceptual idea of self-reflection and searching. These portraits were important, honest, and normalizing representations of spirituality. And I did really want to normalize it, especially for young people. And I think part of that was coming from my own feeling of taboo around having a spiritual practice, really wanting to feel allowed to share it with people. But I felt really frustrated that their portraits couldn't see into the heart of their experiences, because our beliefs and feelings live within our bodies and our minds, not on our faces. So I tried many approaches to capture this internal feeling, this internal belief system, but I found myself representing my own vision and not theirs. So then, wandering around the harbour side one late afternoon, I was struck by the reflections on the water, something I'm sure probably lots of you can imagine. I watched it, mesmerised, before pulling out my phone and taking a snap. It could be argued that this detached me from the experience itself, but it also represented a longing to connect with something bigger. I wondered if everyone does this in these moments, that they're struck by a sense, a feeling, a deep moment of connection, and a longing to capture and keep it. This moment brought a similar peace that I seek through spiritual practices like meditation, only it can't easily be sought out and practiced every day. It just happens. So following this, I contacted all of the people I'd photographed and asked them if this was something they recognised, and if so, for photographs of these moments. They all responded really quickly and were really excited to share them, like they instantaneously understood what I meant. But receiving them, I knew they didn't reveal to me what they felt in the moment. They were low resolution, poor quality, pixelated, overly sharp, and phony, for want of a better word. So how could I return them to the beauty of the moment? I tried various experimental and analog techniques before striking upon the final method, which was rephotographing the images through the surface of the phone screen, recording reflections, scratches, smudges, and fingerprints on the surface of the glass, like you can see here, especially in the image of the Satsuma. It was shot in like really bright sunlight, so you get all of the sort of reflections and glinting off of the surface. I hoped that this intervention might return the images closer to the experience itself, the experience that the person who took it had. As well as that, it also satisfied my own creativity in creating beautifully textured and multi-layered ethereal kind of imagery that suits my style as an artist. Textures and objects on top of the screen, such as raindrops, soil, and plants. Raindrops you can see on this pink flower, as well as I used like a medium format camera, so a film camera that has the ability to have a really shallow depth of field. So you'll see like in the front, there's focus and it kind of drifts off into the background. And I really liked this softness that for me evoked kind of a memory, a softness to a memory, I suppose. And then in addition to that, when printed really large, in areas of the pictures, you can actually see the pixels of the screen, they become visible too. So there's these layers of separation. And I became fascinated by the idea that spirituality and technology are often considered to be incompatible. But through this process of back and forth, they converge from spiritual moment to digital image to device to experimental photographic process, and eventually return to what is arguably a kind of spiritual moment, an artwork. These chains of connection between digital and spiritual return me to my own understanding of Buddhist philosophy and interconnectedness and circular nature of all things. Within this framework, technology and spirituality are not just theoretically connectable, but historically, physically, and inherently connected, in the same way that it is said that clouds exist in your glass of water. Connection is at the heart of all spiritual practice. Technology in the wrong hands can easily risk a disconnection from each other and from our spiritual and physical lives. However, this project has revealed to me that when used mindfully, these devices, which are so deeply embedded into our lives, can also support our ongoing search for connection. Also, this work is going to be exhibited at the Arnold Feeney Graduate Show in June. So if you want to come and see it, then do. I'll pass back to Shawn.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Dulcie. So project I'm going to talk about is a fresh project that's just fresh off the blocks for me. I've called it Type Your Idea, and it is in response to an invitation by AUB Gallery in Bournemouth to contribute work to an exhibition they've got on at the moment around AI and the relationship between AI and creative practice, and it's there until April the 24th, I believe. So I'll talk through this in quite a descriptive way. It's quite a new project, but yeah, I'll talk through the different stages of the way that I approached it. So art and technology increasingly intersect in my creative practice, open up new possibilities and artistic expression, and how it fits in with this wider framework again of small anthropology under the channel of creative inquiry and embracing and mixed methods in both the research approach but also in the output style. You know, often when we talk about mixed methods in research, often we're talking about mixed methodologies or different methodological approaches. Obviously, as an art school, we celebrate the practice as well. And this was very much one where the practice was paramount in showing the findings of the research, if you like. So Type Your Idea is a project I developed to explore the relationship between artificial intelligence, traditional wood carving, and spiritual practice by combining AI-generated design with human craftsmanship. I wanted to demonstrate how digital tools can be integrated into traditional artistic processes while still remaining cultural and spiritual significance. So I started off using an AI app. This one is DaVinci. It's just on my phone. It wasn't any special app like Midjourney or anything. It's just one that I was just messing about with. And I was putting into these different apps this phrase, Ethiopian Orthodox wooden carving design. I knew for the exhibition I want to do something within an Ethiopian Orthodox kind of flavor. They have very intricate carving styles, and this is what DaVinci app spat out at the other end, literally just based on those 6 words. So I refined the design in Photoshop. I wanted to incorporate some other elements as well. So this on the left is called a meskel, which is an Ethiopian cross. And I also wanted to incorporate Lion of Judah symbols, which are deeply connected with Ethiopian Orthodox and Rastafari traditions. And I've been researching into this in other parts of my research. I had a Impact Accelerator grant, the UWE in partnership with AHRC, and that took me to Ethiopia in 2023. And I've just shot a film that relates to those histories and those cultural connections between Ethiopia and the UK, particularly Southwest UK. And I wanted to bring in those visuals into this practice and keep it connected. So once I finalized the digital design, I then prepped it using laser etching, and I etched the pattern onto a 30 by 30 centimeter piece of plywood, and then cut a second thicker base, which I then glued together to add depth and stability. The laser etched line serves as a guide for the next phase, which was the hand carving. So using traditional carving tools, I carefully deepened and shaped the refined design, and this stage required precision, patience, and a meditative focus. But throughout all of the carving activities that I was doing, when I was sitting there with the carved piece on my lap and, starting to work into the lines that were made by the laser etching, I immersed myself in different forms of media in relation to Ethiopian culture, biblical themes, Rastafari philosophy. I watch films, documentaries, listen to different forms of music, discussion programs in the background, lectures, sermons, and I created an environment while carving which became more than just a physical task. It was a reflective and immersive experience, or that's what I was trying to create, was this immersive experience by flooding the room with the audio sensibilities and the senses that my whole body was involved in the carving process. My ears as well as my hands touching the wood, touching the carving tools, etc. So once the carving was complete, I varnished it and sanded it, treated the wood with dye to enhance its depth and its texture. So these are some of the media that I was kind of consuming during the time and playing. This is work in progress, the tools, and you can see how I'm carving into the laser etching and turning what was then the digital laser etched into a hand refined piece of work. Now, what I was also interested in this, because digital technology was being used, I was also interested in the labor, the sweat labor, but also the time labor. How long was this thing taking? Because hand carving is notoriously time-consuming process, which was at odds with some of the speed and the convenience that I had from the digital technology. This was an Ethiopian event that I attended in Birmingham earlier this year in January. And you could see there the carving that they have on the cross, the meskels, both the wood and the metal, extremely intricate, and they're most beautiful objects. So I started to make a list of all of the different jobs that I was doing in order and looking at the different time that it took. So coming up with the idea itself was very quick. When I had the email from AUB Gallery, I kind of knew straight away that I didn't want to just stick some prompts into the AI and then print it out and then send it to them in a frame. That wasn't interesting to me. I knew I wanted to do something else. I was already doing wood carving anyway, so I was interested in combining it. So it was a kind of a latent idea that came to fruition. So coming at the idea was very quick, and I've got it down in 30 seconds. Generating the image from the DALL-E app, I've got down to 30 seconds. It's probably a little bit more than that, actually, because it makes you watch an advert. So it might have been like 1 minute, 30 seconds. But it's very quick. And then you can see there, adapting it in Photoshop, had to turn it into Illustrator. Laser etching itself was about an hour process. worked with Alexandra in the laser etching space at Barashton. Gluing the wood, having to leave it to set was a long process, 8 hours to leaving it, but then carving the wood 16 hours, if not more than that, you know, really slow process, really detailed. Couldn't do it in one sitting, you know, had to come back to it in different days, but roughly may have added up to about 16 hours. But then also changing ideas as we go through. So varnishing the wood, that took ages, took 5 days to dry it. But then I had a change of idea because once I saw the varnish on the wood, I didn't like it anymore. So I couldn't just control Z and undo it. I had to then sand all the varnish off, which took a couple of hours. Then I reapplied the wood dye, and that was much more satisfactory. So in total, about 156 hours possibly to make this piece of work, from very fast beginning to a much more slow, you know, labored process throughout it. So again, some of the behind the scenes there, the varnishing, and it's a gloss varnish, which I didn't like when it was on. Sanded it down, but this is the final thing. So this is the final piece that I made. So it's again 30 by 30 centimeters, thick piece of wood. And yeah, I was pleased with the final outcome. So the project illustrates how AI-generated design can serve as a foundation for human craftsmanship rather than replacing it. While AI played a role in the initial concept, the hand carving process ensured that the final artwork retained a deeply personal and human touch. By embedding cultural and spiritual themes throughout the creation process, I transformed this work from a purely technical exercise into an act of reflection and engagement with tradition. By generating AI traditional craftsmanship and meditative practices, type your idea hopefully raises questions about how digital tools and human creativity can coexist. Rather than diminishing the value of our artistic and cultural heritage, I believe these technologies can reinforce and enrich it. And as I say, it's in Bournemouth until the 24th of April. And I thought it was a nice touch to sign the back. And this is how it's displayed in the exhibition as well. So they've printed out different parts of the, you know, the images that I just showed you. That's the piece on the left. And then I've also made a booklet that goes alongside it as well in the exhibition.
Great. Yeah, that was really interesting to see, Shawn, because I hadn't actually seen it yet. Yeah, so I wanted to add that digital platforms, they don't just provide spaces for spiritual practice, they also shape how we experience and feel those spaces. Whether it's the intimacy of a WhatsApp prayer group, the act of sharing spiritual reflections on social media, or the sense of collective engagement in a live stream service, digital tools are all woven into this fabric of contemporary faith and ritual. But what is most striking is not the radical disruption of tradition, but rather the subtle ways that technology becomes part of everyday spiritual life. The most profound shifts often emerge not from grand innovations, but through the quiet, incremental adaptations that people make. As Michel de Certeau reminds us, everyday life is built on small, improvised practices, shaped by the way that people naturally integrate technology into their routines, like through phone photographs, the ways we interact with things every day. But by engaging with creative practices, we gain valuable insights into how spirituality is lived, remembered, and shared in this digital age. Digital innovation is not just about what's new, it's about recognizing and understanding what's already happening in life. Through creative arts, we can not only document these shifts, but actively participate in shaping the evolving landscape of digital spirituality. People do the best they can to uphold their beliefs within the framework that society provides us. And I would argue that technology is absolutely inescapable if you want to live a normal life integrated within the rest of society. So how we navigate this relationship to technology continues to provide us with fertile ground for exploration as creative practitioners.
Thank you, Dulcie. So just finally, just going to talk about one more project, and again, very personal project. It's a longitudinal action research project that I started exactly 151 days ago. So what I decided to do was, and I didn't start this project to become a research project. It's something I wanted to do anyway, but then as with all these things, it kind of blends and morphs into what we think about day to day, even as researchers. So I'm very interested in the Ethiopian Bible. The Ethiopian Bible has all of the books that you have in a normal Bible. I say normal Bible, such as the King James version of the Bible. The King James version of the Bible has 66 books. The Ethiopian Orthodox Bible has all of those books and more. In total, it has 88. In this particular, 81, but in this particular version, it has 88 because it has other apocryphal books in there as well. So I've always been interested to read this book. As you can imagine, it's incredibly thick. Just to read a straightforward Bible is really thick. But I wanted to find a way of reading it. And there's a tradition within, particularly the Rastafari tradition, which is about reading a chapter a day of the Bible. And it says you just find out the truth for yourself. So I wanted to adopt that practice to then me reading this book. I bought the book off a well-known online bookstore, but it just sat there. 1 month went past and 2 months went past, and it just sat there and it remained unread. So I thought, okay, how can I do this? How can I get into this? Because I didn't want it to just sit there. So I thought, okay, why don't I set up an Instagram account and I read it publicly, 1 chapter a day, to keep myself accountable to read it. And that's what I did. So 29th of September this year, I've been reading a chapter a day of the Ethiopian Bible, pretty much every single morning. Sometimes it does creep into the afternoon or the evening, but 99% of it's been in the morning. And that's what I've been up to. So each day I record the reading and a short reflection, and I share it online on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. I set up a TikTok account specifically for this. And then I started to think again how this relates to, what I do within my wider research context and under knowledge values, this channel, reflexivity of the researcher, the inclusion of autoethnographic positionality and vulnerability. Again, it speaks to what I kind of do anyway, and this fusion between the personal and the professional. So every day I record this reading. I always keep the recordings below 15 minutes because otherwise they won't upload onto Instagram if they're longer than that. So you could say that is a case of the tail wagging the dog, where the technology is telling me how long this piece should go. But actually 15 minutes is good. I don't want it to be longer than that, because I do the Bible reading and then I do reasoning reflection on what I just read. And I do that very spontaneously. It's not scripted. I literally read it and then respond to it straight away. So I'm having to decipher the narrative as I'm reading it, and also the messages and any symbolism. I don't want to get into a position where, it's longer than it needs to be. So 15 minutes is actually a good ample time. The practice is first and foremost a way of holding myself accountable, as I say. But doing so, I put myself out there, making myself vulnerable by sharing my thoughts and my opinions, and even my criticisms openly. Because in the Old Testament, God is not always presented in a good light, and I have to be honest in sharing my opinions, and where certain chapters that I've read make me uncomfortable. And I just have to trust that my words are received in the same respectful spirit that they are intended. I also leave in any mistakes I make during the reading, such as mispronunciations or where I just trip up my own tongue. and I try to keep the process as raw and unfiltered as possible. So you can see here, these are just the screen grabs of the YouTube on the left, then TikTok in the middle, and the Instagram on the right. And I say often, I try not to repeat myself, but I do say in a number of them, I'm not doing this for the likes. I'm not doing this for the internet fame or anything like that. I'm literally doing it for selfish reasons, that I want to read it myself, and anyone watching it is holding myself accountable. And it's interesting just gauging the different levels of engagement across the platforms. So on the YouTube, it's the YouTube that I've had for years, since I started YouTube back in the day. So, it's got 204 subscribers, but the engagement on YouTube isn't that great. Actually, it takes a lot longer for people to sometimes watch them on YouTube. There's not many likes, there's not many comments, there's the odd one or two. But then when I've spoken to people offline, they're like, oh yeah, I saw that thing you're doing and I watch it every day, whatever. But on YouTube, they're not showing you they've watched it by liking it, etc. But they are people that are engaging. But then what I found is when I've then looked back at some of the earlier videos that I've uploaded there, the other readings, actually you can see there are more views and there are more likes. I don't get notified on likes on YouTube. So it seems to be they're sat there on the shelf and people engage in them when they want to with YouTube. It's not a day-to-day ritual that we then see with TikTok. And the daily habit of doom scrolling is very much a new social media phenomena, where actually even YouTube predates that second wave of social media. So is interesting with TikTok, and I never had a TikTok account before doing this. And again, I don't have that many followers, 90 followers, but the engagement is actually really strong on TikTok, because it's entering different people's feeds even when they don't follow me. So lots of people are seeing my post in TikTok and they're engaging with it. As you can see there, it says it's 6,009 likes, and that's only from 9, but that's more than the 90 followers. So I'm also getting an engagement from people that I don't follow and they don't follow me. But it's interesting to see that difference between the TikTok engagement and YouTube. And then with Instagram was a surprise to me, because this was a brand new Instagram account that didn't exist before I started doing this. But very quickly, I got followers on Instagram, 639 followers on Instagram, and it has a very healthy engagement. So I think that's also plugged, I don't really know how the algorithms are working, but that's obviously going to be connected to my Facebook account and my other personal Instagram account, saying that the algorithms are working in the favor of this in Instagram. But I'm not doing any job with advertising it, etc., etc. It just sits there, and whoever engages with it. This kind of engagement with scripture through digital platforms is part of a much larger shift with how people practice faith today. Studies have shown that a significant number of individuals now turn to social media to share their religious beliefs. A study by Pew Research Center showed that 17% of young respondents post and share content about religion in social media, which suggests that social media is not just a space for entertainment or personal updates, but is also becoming a space of a digital extension of their religious practices. By reading and reflecting daily in this way, I found that the process creates a space for engagement, even though that's not the primary motivation. People respond in comments, send private messages, ask questions, share their own perspectives, and also seek, on occasion, personal advice. On a couple of occasions, people have challenged my interpretations, but mostly people seem just appreciative of hearing the Bible being read and allowing them to engage in the book in a different way and gaining new insights into the Bible, and it be a book that they may otherwise not read. This aligns with one of Pew's findings, which suggests that some people are more receptive to authentic expressions of faith online than overly polished or performative content. At the same time, digital spirituality in this way raises interesting questions. Social media can appear to flatten hierarchies. Anyone can contribute, comment, or critique. Traditional religious authority is no longer a prerequisite for leading discussions about faith. Instead of these spaces creating a kind of digital agora where interpretations and insights circulate freely. But of course, none of that is necessarily a good thing. We all know headlines where impressionistic, or I shouldn't even say impressionistic people, goodwill people have been radicalized and exploited by exactly the same way people come across as, you know, prophets, etc., and then them getting exploited. So it comes with its warnings, this kind of open gate where anyone can do these practices. I try to be as responsible in my readings and reasonings. If people are asking me questions, if I don't know, I won't make up the answer. If they need to go and speak to an expert in the field, or a priest even, or a counsellor, then I will signpost them. I don't pretend to be the all font of knowledge in this way. And I'm always transparent to say, I'm doing this for me, and you know, engaging on a personal level. I'm not a spokesperson for anybody or anything or any religious practice. It's very much a personal endeavor. So for me, the process is about engaging with scripture in a way that keeps me accountable, and it also demonstrates how social media can be used as a tool for religious practice and religious exploration. It's not about gaining followers and going viral. It's about consistency, hopefully honesty, and making faith a part of everyday life, whether that's online or offline. Thank you very much. So, thank you. So, yeah, welcome any questions, comments. Be really interested to hear people's thoughts, but thank you for listening. So yeah, any questions, comments, please feel free to. It's always weird with the webinars, you can't see people.
Both of you, thank you. Sorry, I've moved from one room to the other because it suddenly got very noisy in the office. Shawn, I posted the question in the chat, but just to ask you, can we have a chat about Apocrypha at some point? I wasn't aware that the Ethiopian Bible contains the Apocrypha in, or a set of Apocrypha in an official edition. Yeah. And I say my context is in the chat. I'm a very, very lapsed Catholic, now meditator, but I've got an interest in things that have vanished from official texts, and kind of what happens to those and why. But yeah, so I don't know whether it's worth you talking about that now for a second. Just that struck me in you talking.
Yeah, so yeah, I try not to get too in depth on it, but the Ethiopian Orthodox Church itself, that has this as its standard biblical text, is very interesting. It's the second oldest established church in the world. The first one was Armenian Orthodox, then Ethiopian Orthodox, then got established in the 5th century, and then Catholicism was officially formed later on in that same century. So when you go into an Ethiopian Orthodox service, some of it can look very Catholic. It's actually because it predates Catholicism, but they're shared, because the word Catholicism means Orthodox. Orthodox means Catholic, you know. So but there was a schism where they then separated, and I won't go into the reasons why, but they're separate. So the Orthodox has its own bishops, it has its own patriarch, which is essentially the Pope. But essentially, in terms of those core books and some of those core principles, they actually share a lot, you know, in terms of confession and those kind of things as well. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, Tom, that we can catch up on. Absolutely.
Happy to, and thank you, Mark, for the note in the Q&A. Shawn, can you see the Q&A okay?
So Verity, thank you. Oh, thank you very much. And important reflections on faith and academia. Thank you, Verity. And yeah, that's why, you know, when I got invited to do this talk, it's a case of, yeah, I wanted to use this to kind of open up conversations that we don't often have in these spaces, you know. So yeah, thanks. Mark, the Jutro Canon is a term used instead of a pejorative Protestant term. Thank you, Mark. That's good to know.
Every day is a school day, Shawn.
Absolutely. So, oh, what was really interesting? What was your rationale for all three platforms? I guess that's to me, is it about the YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram? Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, it was one was TikTok, so I was kind of interested to see. There's all the furore with TikTok about privacy, and I've got my own views on why I think that was being clamped down in America, but I won't get into the politics of that. But thinking about putting something that is very unsocial media friendly in a very heavily social media space. It takes a long time to read these Bible chapters. It's slow, lots of words and lots of names, etc. It's not the quick reels that social media want us to do. So I deliberately wanted to do something in that space that didn't feel like it belongs there. So that's why I set up a TikTok account, because I was just interested to see how it would go down, quite frankly. And it's really a case of just throwing it in and just see what happens. With YouTube, I thought it was a good archiving space because that was my YouTube channel from ages ago. So I thought, well, if I'm going to put them anywhere to save, it should be on my YouTube. Then I've got my own archive of them. So that was a kind of a standard anyway. And I think Instagram, originally I didn't put them on Instagram, and I actually set up that Instagram account for them after I'd already started the readings. But people that were on Instagram heard about what I was doing, and they're like, "Oh, where are they? You should share them on Instagram." It came through that, so I didn't want to flood my own personal Instagram account with it, so that's why I set up a separate one and did it that way. So there's three different rationales for why I did those three different approaches. Dulcie, I don't know if any of these you want to take as well. I don't want to this one.
Yeah, the question about interactions with audience around their feeling this too. I think I haven't actually shown my work like in exhibition yet, so I'm really excited to be doing that, to see how the work is received. I'll be showing it in April in like a smaller group show, and then in June in like the big kind of degree show. And I really hope that people receive it with openness, because I feel like the work is offering openness, but I feel a concern that it's a topic that makes people uncomfortable and like withdraw a little bit if it's not something that they engage within themselves usually. So I really hope that it will have like an openness and inviting nature that allows people to contemplate and kind of broaden their understanding of things. But I also have this concern that it might be something that people like read the word spirituality and are just like, not for me, which is, a fine response. But yeah, I've just got my fingers crossed. I don't know what response you have or how you feel work in this theme's received, Shawn.
Yeah, I guess because these works are quite new for me, so I guess I'll speak to the first two, the one I did about red, gold, and green in everyday life, but also the AI one. I think people with the AI one were just sort of, intrigued by in a way, the novelty value of doing the wood carving. That's still a relatively new activity for me. And that's also why I wanted to do it as well, to challenge myself as well. But the response in the exhibition was, it was good. It was interesting. It made people talk and think about that connection between the handcraft. I was actually surprised by in the exhibition, there's more of that than I realized there would be. I was actually maybe wrongly expecting it to be mostly 2D images on a wall and only a couple of 3D type installation pieces, but actually most of the exhibition is some form of model. They haven't done it in the same way that I've done it, and very different, but they have taken a AI inspiration and then turned that into something kind of physical. So yeah, I was actually pleased to see that as well, that there are shared languages around. And I think with the earlier one that I was doing, yeah, I think again, I think primarily I was just interested in exploring the faith in a different way, like Rastafari ideology, in a way that even other practitioners of that faith haven't seen. And I think it just made people scratch their, oh, this is different. Do you know what I mean? There's Shawn doing his weird arty thing again, but they kind of respected it because it's a different language of spiritual practice, not just the usual. Do you know what I mean? But it does take a certain confidence sometimes to do those kind of things. But I'm kind of old enough now to just take it on the chin in the room. Can I the anonymous attendee, what do you have a sense of what traditional churches do in social media? I mean, I'll even speak to this about my mum's church. Before my mum passed away during COVID, I saw my mum's church having Zoom services, also WhatsApp groups and these kind of things, and that continued after COVID lockdowns, and it just became part and parcel of what they do. You know, they have WhatsApp groups and all the rest of it, and I think now it's just another extension of you know, Bath Abbey. I know they stream their services and that kind of stuff. It's just a bigger part of their portfolio, and I don't see that going away. I think that's probably the same for many spiritual traditions, not just Christianity.
Yeah, definitely, especially in the young person's Buddhist group I go to. We've tried various things. So we have like WhatsApp groups for different elements of practice, like a sort of environmental activism like area of what we do, and you know, a way to pursue different things within the practice. But then also we've tried doing mixed online and physical sessions, but it's quite challenging actually technology wise for smaller community groups where there's a lot of discussion. I think services that involve more listening maybe function better than other services.
Yeah. I know we're at 2 o'clock. Can we just take the last 2 questions, if that's all right? There's one here, anonymous. So the final bit says, I wonder if you have any interactions with audience. Oh, right, that's the one you just read, isn't it? The audiences one, yeah, that's fine.
So
Francis, hello, Pat. Thanks, Dulcie and Shawn. Very interesting. Can you say to what extent, if at all, you feel you engage differently with your research and religion because of the use of AI in this instance? Would you have created something differently in the absence of AI? So I guess, is that the one about the carvings? Might be that's the one about the carvings. I have done carvings. That's the only carving that I've done that's involved in AI starting point and inspiration. Every other bit of carving I've done has been hand drawn, or you know, much more kind of analogy inspiration. So I'm not sure. Yeah, it's interesting doing that, but even using the laser etching felt like cheating a bit, even though you know you still have to carve into it. And you know, when I've done the carvings before that, I'd be, you know, drawing on the wood and then carving into it. But why should laser etching feel like it's cheating? Because it's not a technology that we know that's been around for a long time. So I do feel more connected to the stuff that I've done that haven't done laser etching and haven't done carving. All my carvings I do have a spiritual element of some degree. And I do have to say, I do feel more connected with them. You know, so I don't know if you can see, like this mescal I carved, and that's used laser etching. But I feel a bit less connected to that than this one, which was all just by hand and didn't involve any technology whatsoever. And I do feel more connected with this one than I do with that one. So maybe that answers your question.
Yeah, and I think for me, like I don't use AI in my work, but in terms of using technology within my practice, or like focusing my research and practice around technology, has just brought a kind of fluidity and comfort around using technological tools within creativity, whereas I did have this very like polarized sense that, like some of the participants in the project, this sense that technology only took away from spiritual practice. So yeah, I think the making the work has eased this tension that I had. Now carrying my phone in my pocket doesn't feel like a problem. It's more of like an acceptance that it can exist, they can coexist.
Just very quickly respond to Freya. Thanks, Freya. She's asking whether we've got other future projects. I do actually want to continue working with Dulcie, and particularly writing this up as a book chapter, journal article. I myself are writing a book about small anthropology, and I'm interested in whether we could work up a chapter, co-written chapter about that, about this for that book. So yeah, for me, it's just a part of me. So anything I do and make will be, whether I call it a project or whether it's a hobby or whether, but it will continue. But what about you, Dulcie? Have you got further projects in this area?
Yeah, I do. I've got loads of ideas actually, and feel really excited, like post MA, that now I can sort of go in 10 different directions at once, which is more how my creative mind works. But I'm thinking about various maybe video pieces. Particularly, I'm really fascinated by hand gestures. So hand gestures in spiritual practice and service. Most religions and spiritual practices have some sort of variety of hand gestures in which they're almost like tools of engagement, but also our hands are used as the primary tool for us to connect with digital devices. So yeah, interested in looking at how we physically touch these two different things. That's, I think, my main thinking at the moment.
Thanks, Teresa, for these contacts. That sounds really interesting. Teresa Dillon. Amy, are we able to save these questions? I would actually like to go through and even respond to them, but we don't have time now.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, that'd be good. But thank you, everybody. It's been really engaging. Yes, we haven't really had time to go through all the questions, but I like Ellie's one. She feels inspired to share her other Instagram account. So please follow me on your other Instagram account. Whatever's going on there, I want to see it. So thank you.
Yeah, everyone. It's been really, really great for me to think through this and share it with people.
Yeah, no, really good. I think we might have to stop there because I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Thank you both. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Dulcie. I will say thank you to all the questions. To remind you, we should have another one of these coming up in the next month or so. We don't have anything planned, but watch this space and we'll announce the 8th in our series. But thank you again. Have a brilliant afternoon and we'll see you all soon.
Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.